And so with that, I will turn it over to our first presenter, Jim Bohnsack. So thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jana. I appreciate it. And thank you all for allowing us to have an audience today and to share this with you guys. We've been on a bit of a journey here, and we've been kind of sharing this story as we go from our kind of perspective, and hoping that the lessons we learn along this journey of investing in technology, deploying the technology, the good and the bad and the ugly that we learn along the way, we hope to share it with the broader provider community. We think it's important and incumbent upon us as partners to the provider community to help in any way we can, and sharing this information we hope is helpful. So we're certainly available for questions after, during this, even beyond that. Please let us know how we can be helpful. Real quick, Aspirion, you guys may be familiar with who we are, but if not, we are a revenue cycle, a tech-enabled revenue cycle services company. It's been around for a number of years and changed over that time through a number of acquisitions and different capabilities being brought together. But we work with 12 of the top 15 health systems in the United States. We cover everything from, just think broadly, the most complex claims to deal with. So we started as a complex claims vendor, and we still do that very well today with MBA and workers' comp, out-of-state Medicaid, VA, and TRICARE. But the majority of what we do, honestly, is in the denial space. And in particular, we've been known for the use of our attorneys to overturn high-dollar, complex clinical denials. And so that helped frame, some of the journey, and some of the investment we made in technology was spurred by the need to address efficiency in that service line that we offer, and help our 180 attorneys and 80 clinicians do their job more efficiently. And then further, how do we scale that up, and how do we do that for a broader series of denials with lower dollar amounts and things like that. So we'll get into that as we go through. As we get going, let me start with some introductions here. Let me make sure I can flip this. My colleague, Chief AI Officer here, Spencer Allee. Spencer, you take a minute and introduce yourself, and then I'll do the same.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. Hey, everyone. Great to be here. As Jim said, I live in Chicago, and I think it's currently -6 degrees. So I feel your pain if you're also in the Midwest. But I joined Aspirion about 2 years ago to build out our investments in technology and AI. My background prior to that was not in healthcare, but it was in applied AI in kind of B2B regulated spaces. So I led technology and AI at a regulatory technology company focused on modeling regulatory rule books and letters and things like that. For about 5 years, a couple of roles before that, spent the bulk of my early career at PwC, built out their first AI lab and led that for about 4 years. So very interested in how we can actually create real value for real customers and business problems with this technology, and not just have shiny demos, but actually create something real with it. So excited to talk about how we're doing that at Aspirion today. Pass it back to you, Jim.
Thanks, Spencer. Yeah, so Jim Bohnsack, I'm the Chief Strategy and Client Officer for Aspirion. I've been here for about a year and a half. I get to work on both the what do we build and product, what do we buy, M&A, and then broadly, how do we work with our clients to make sure that those solutions are actually providing value, as Spencer talked about. I've been in the healthcare space, revenue cycle, and technology for 25 plus years. TransUnion, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, Conifer, I've made the rounds. I've been here about a year and a half, and it's been an exciting time. I live in Dallas. I am currently in New York. But am from, I saw this audience and a number of people. I was born in Boone County Hospital in Columbia, Missouri. My dad went to Mizzou. My mom went to Mizzou. My brother went to Kansas. My grandparents went to Kansas. So I've covered the territory for Region 8 here in a pretty meaningful way. My brother still lives in Kansas City. So deep in my heart and where I'm from. So glad to see some of the folks from the Missouri area and other surrounding areas joining us today. And again, like I said, hopefully this will be helpful for you all as you think about, addressing some of these pain points. You guys are uber familiar with what's going on in the market, but let me give you a perspective, kind of what we see from the Aspirion side, since we cross geographies and clients and size of clients and all of those things. Nobody would be surprised, and we're all facing the fact that denials are going through the roof. And in particular, what we're noticing is it's not just the volume of denials, but the flavor of denials that we're seeing that are also troubling. And that many of these complex clinical denials or denial types that require clinical validation are a major kind of problem. And then on top of that, with what we're seeing from the payer side in this massive investment in payment integrity, they'll call it, as a broad category. Initiatives around payment integrity. Are we paying the right claim? Are we paying it for the right level of care? Are we paying it at all? Does it meet medical necessity? Does it meet these new rules? Can we control the overall cost of care, as we believe it's, payers' fiduciary responsibility to manage that cost, et cetera? We're seeing them invest heavily in technology and more advanced technology than ever before, where that's resulting in us seeing a level of denials and the speed with which they're denying, and that's not been a secret in many articles, the speed with which they're applying this technology to review claims is unprecedented. And quite frankly, because they have the technology now, they can do a more comprehensive review in a shorter amount of time of more claims. And so, of course, errors are being caught at a higher level of accuracy on their end. But even beyond that, some of the new advanced technologies with these machine learning models and other artificial intelligence broadly, which we'll get into, are allowing them, again, to do it in a comprehensive way. And then furthermore, some of those machine learning models are able to, adjust percentages to say, X amount of these cases that we've seen historically, X percent are generally not as complex as they've been billed in, we've received a claim for. So therefore, partially pay them, deny them, downgrade them, question them in some form or fashion. And as you guys can appreciate, what we're seeing is that's putting the onus back on the provider to justify that that patient was in fact septic, and it did in fact require that level of care, that level of input for us to treat that patient in that case. And we got to write that all up, provide evidence, and share that back with the payer to then justify the amount of reimbursement. And so those just overall increase in volume due to the fact that they're utilizing this new technology, the types of denials that they are generating out of that, whether they be full-on med-nec denials for the entire claim or they're partial denials, all puts that onus back on the provider organization. And as I mentioned, Aspirion has had a unique strength in the use of attorneys to draft these appeal letters. And we don't use attorneys because we want them to go, sue the payers in court. Some provider clients would love to see that happen. But we use attorneys because they're very well trained in understanding what were the facts of the case, so the medical record, against what were the guidelines or the laws we should have followed in that case, and is there evidence that we did or didn't meet those requirements, and then write that all up in a brief, or in our world, an appeal letter, and submit that back to the governing body, which is the payer, to justify that we should or shouldn't be paid a certain rate or at all, and all of those things. And so as we went on this journey, one of the things we were trying to solve for is those are very expensive resources. And you guys have very much a similar situation where it's not like you have a bunch of, that I know of, a bunch of coders, certified coders or clinicians sitting around with nothing better to do than to review historical medical records, compare them to, payer guidelines, payer policies, care guidelines, coding guidelines, and then write some appeal letter to respond to these one-off claims. And so what we were challenged with is again, how do we scale? How do we use technology to make that model more efficient, to allow those folks to do their job more efficiently? And then furthermore, how do we ultimately kind of automate that to hit a series of denials that we weren't otherwise unable to touch just because of the unit economics? We couldn't, I can justify putting an attorney to write an appeal letter for a claim that's, $10,000 in potential reimbursement. It's really hard to justify using that same attorney and doing that same level of work when the $10,000 claim got downgraded and reimbursed 8 and the delta's, 2,000. It's the same effort and the same input, but the return on that investment is obviously much lower when it comes to these denial downgrades and patient type downgrades, DRG downgrades, you name it, those partial denials, I'll call them. That's hard to justify. And so part of the business problem we were trying to solve for is how do we address that issue with technology? So AI, as you guys know, this is not new. Artificial intelligence has been around since the 50s and evolved over time to include, kind of machine learning models. And then further in the 2010, 2020 range, these deep learning models. And then now, more importantly, and more recently, the large language models are what have really changed the game as far as we're concerned. The ability for us to take unstructured data, structure it into these large language models, and produce a generative output that has, some level of reasoning in it is what has really changed the game in terms of our ability to truly automate a process. You guys have been around for a while. You know that we've had machine learning models and scoring models and, self-pay prioritization and propensity to pay models and things like that. They're great. They're good. We have them. But they're only good enough to help us try to work more efficiently. But the process is still generally manual. And that if I've got 100 accounts to work through today and I can only get through 60, which 60 should I work that are going to generate the best return in the fastest amount of time? They're great. A lot of people talk about AI, ML, blah, blah, blah. And then they, throw out RPA. And again, RPA is fine for certain use cases. That is not what we're talking about when we're talking about the actual development we've done with technology. We have some RPA. It's all good. It can help automate some manual processes, but it's not truly taking the whole process and automating and certain functions of that. So as we as Aspirion and looking at our business and some of the business challenges we faced, along the same lines as what the market faced, one of the key things is you start to think about utilizing artificial intelligence and deploying automation within your processes, being very specific about what the use case is you're trying to solve for. And so in ours, again, as I mentioned, with these 180 attorneys and 80 clinicians, a lot of where they spend their time is reviewing medical records, drafting appeal letters to respond to a certain denial type, those that require clinical validation. And so for us, the focus was, how can we develop a series of technologies and tools that will allow them to do that job first more efficiently, and then ultimately work towards automating that in its entirety. And then as you think about the use case, then breaking down what's the manual process through which we do that today? What are all those components? What are the reasoning logic? What are the sources of data you need to fuel that process? It's also very important to understand that. What is the access that I have to that data? I'll be honest, you start to get into that data and you realize, yeah, we have it, but it's unstructured in a way, or it's unindexed in a way, or it lacks cleanliness or fidelity, and all of those things. You start to understand some of the core challenges related to the data. Then you also realize there's certain types of data that you need programmatic access to that you have to go solve for that. How do we license specific code sets? How do we license other guidelines such as coding guidelines or care guidelines? How do you get access to that data and how do you make that data programmatically available to both the humans and to the platform itself. And then becomes the platform. So a lot of people jump straight to, we need a platform, we need a technology. If I just plug in a technology and license it, it'll help solve this problem. Not true. This is not as easy as just, ask ChatGPT to write me an appeal letter. Spencer will get into the actual technology of it, but it is far more complex than that. And so for us, we looked at this, can we build it? Do we buy it? Do we partner? What do we do in that regard? And at the end of 2023, September of 2023 to be exact, we actually acquired a company called Infinia ML. And Infinia had been around for about 5 years, based in Durham, North Carolina, building a technology platform that was based on large language models that took unstructured data, structured it, and then produced a generative output. And they had done some work in many industries, and healthcare being one of them. And we had done some pilot work, Spencer in particular had done some pilot work there with them to say, can you work with us to automate this appeal writing process? And the pilot work went so well, we said, we've got to acquire them. And acquire the platform, yes, was important because that gave us a 5-year foundation from which to build. But equally as important, or maybe in my world more important, was the talent we got with that team. I mean, it is today like a dozen PhD data scientists. It is more than a dozen machine learning engineers, all with master's degrees, mostly out of Duke, that have been working together on this platform and solving these business problems for a long period of time. And so for us, our ability to say, here's a specific use case, can we automate the writing of an appeal letter? Here's the data you need to fuel that engine. You guys have the engine, and you guys have the talent and brain power to unlock this use case was a big jumping forward step for us, because building it over time, we couldn't have made up those 5 years that they had spent and all the learnings they had spent. And so it was a big jumping off point for us. So we ultimately made the decision, we, again, don't build it, let's buy it, and then build on top of it. Was super important and an accelerator for us to do this work. And as we began to do this work and build this platform we call DocIQ, which we'll show you, it was also super important to, as we learned along the way, to build this through a series of components that we then string together to create the full automation. So it wasn't just, here again, let's load a medical record into this LLM platform and have it produce an output of an appeal letter. But it was really understanding and breaking down the components of what's needed to do that in a manual way today, prioritizing the impact that those will have on the overall process and the manual way, human way we do it, human-centric way we do it today. And then how can those components that we're building be exposed back to the humans to assist them in the work that they do today? And so you'll see in some examples, but first things first, which seems super rudimentary to many, but if you don't have all of the complete claim data, we had some clients that were just sending us UBs, right? Well, when somebody picks up a UB and hasn't seen it before and all the various code sets on there, you will end up swivel chairing and looking up in code books or online or wherever it is, certain different code sets. What is this J code for? What does this occurrence code mean? What are these things? So first thing, we just licensed a standardized code set from another vendor and then allowed you to view a UB and hover over any of them and see exactly what those codes mean. So you don't have to go look them up, right? It's right there for you. It's already parsed, it's already structured, and you can already see those, kind of code sets indexed. Seems super silly and rudimentary, but when you're bringing a lot of people in newer and they've worked in certain claim sets and other, they don't always know them. So that just by itself, a simple way to make their job easier. Well, we had to do that anyway for the underlying structuring of data. So why not expose it to the end user so to make their job faster? That was one. And then two was, all right, we've got folks that are reviewing hundreds of page medical records to try to understand what happened during that visit. All right, well, we have to load all of that into the large language model too, and we need to structure that data. And then there are certain questions we ask them every time, so we can orient ourselves to the case. Think about like a cover sheet on top of a chart. What happened in this case? Give me a summary. So we could do that and expose that to the end user as well. All of those necessary components were building blocks that, one, help the human do the job more efficiently. We saw about a 40% gain in just their throughput and productivity just by giving a couple of those tools to them. And then they were necessary components to ultimately connecting it end to end to fully automate that process. And so we learned a lot. That was a very easy summary of many learnings from the team and working with our subject matter experts, doing this process manually, then exposing these tools that helped us become more efficient along the way, but then ultimately led us to kind of where we are today, where we've got a number of these components brought together to fully automate. So with that, that is the context. That's what we've been doing. And I'm going to turn it over to Spencer, and he can get into some of the technicals and then show you exactly what it is and how it works.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. So as Jim just kind of talked through, we started with a vision and a strategy and both a big picture problem to solve in the industry with our clients, and also some very specific use cases to address around appeal automation and assistance for our folks. We have a team not just of attorneys and nurses, but of roughly 1,200 operators as well. So there are a lot of people every day that are, subject matter experts working these accounts. And we want to give them the tools to make them as successful as possible so that our outcomes for our clients are as successful as possible. I know this isn't a super technical audience, but I do want to just touch on a little bit of the underlying design, just so that, there's some concreteness to what we're talking about. And when you see the demo that we show, you'll have at least a high level sense for some of what is behind it. So this is a conceptual kind of architectural diagram of the DocIQ platform, as we call it. I won't cover every box here, but I think that the key takeaways are, as Jim mentioned, we have these use cases around prioritizing accounts with machine learning, assisting our people as they work those accounts, and then in some cases fully automating appeal letter generation, which we'll show you. And behind all of those use cases is a fairly complex set of machine learning models, both ones that we host internally, self-hosted, as well as ones that are hosted by providers. So think, OpenAI or Google Gemini or Anthropic Claude, things like that. And a lot of the work that this team has done, as Jim mentioned, we have a team of close to 35 at this point that are focused on these use cases. They are working on, not just, hey, ChatGPT, write me an appeal letter, but what is the detailed logic that goes into writing an appeal letter? What are the data sources that are necessary to make a compelling and correct argument for that? And then how do we design these large language model pipelines in order to actually do that at scale? And through this whole process, you'll see there's user feedback collection on the upper right there. All of this is done with a quality and security focus first. So it's very much human in the loop. Anything that's produced is reviewed, and we'll talk more about what the platform does. But just as a preview of how we think about quality, we now generate appeal letters in production for, in particular, DRG downgrades. When we first released that capability back in September, we produced a set of appeal letters that were, produced by the platform here, based on accounts that we had already worked that were successful. So those were accounts historically that were DRG downgrade accounts that we had an attorney write an appeal letter for, and that were successful. We took those 20 accounts, we produced a generative appeal letter with our platform, and then we blinded those accounts and had our top 5 attorneys and clinicians review those appeal letters as an initial test of quality to look at, do we think if these had been submitted instead, they would have met the bar for, a successful overturn, because we know that they did originally, because those were successful accounts. And then we compared, the rubric that was used, tested the quality of the argument, the comprehensiveness of the evidence that was extracted, the style, grammar, spelling, etc., of the letter itself, in order to, be a kind of a comprehensive judgment of the quality of that letter. And in our first MVP release, the platform-generated letters slightly outperformed the human-generated letters by about 5% in terms of overall score. We expanded the platform in December and made some tweaks and improvements, and then we did the same blind test, and those letters outperformed the humans in those cases just by close to 35%. So we're seeing significant improvements, and we have confidence as we roll this out that the quality of what we've generated with these kind of pipelines that are illustrated here is actually generating, high quality letters. And as we start to see those cycle through the adjudication cycle with payers, we're seeing slightly better success rates even. So, I think the lesson here is we are better than either just machines or just humans alone. We are building this platform that uses our subject matter experts in the places where they're most valuable, reviewing what's produced here by the platform, and then also dealing with more complex cases that we can't handle yet, and generating the best outcomes for our clients, both in terms of time to cash, success rates, the quality of the letters, all of those things. And this, what you're seeing here, is kind of the structure behind it, so to speak. So if we flip to the next one, I want to talk a little bit more about the process, and then we will flip to a demo right after this. Just to kind of reiterate, why we're able to do this now and what exactly the platform is doing. The way that I've come to understand it as I've learned this business over the past couple of years is, in order to make a compelling argument about, why a particular claim should be paid at a particular level and why it meets the standards, you need access to a wide variety of data sources. So that's what you see in the middle here: the claim level data, the initial response from the payer, the denial letter if it's present, the clinical information in the medical record, coding guidelines, clinical care guidelines, managed care contracts, payer policies. All of these things together contain the logic that actually is required for a compelling argument. And certain cases might not need to touch every single one of these, but broadly speaking, the logic is very interconnected between all these data sources and in a completely unstructured way, right? I mean, historically, there have been some efforts at encoding, contract logic in structured databases like SQL, but those are always very error prone. And in general, this is why our industry exists, right? Is we need experts to go in and look at all of these documents to understand what the kind of ground truth of the situation is and make the best argument possible to reimburse. So we know that that's the process our people go through it on the top there. They investigate why was this denied, and they understand what were the criteria to actually, submit the claim at a certain level of complexity, gather the right evidence from the clinical information and these other guidelines, ultimately write a compelling argument, and then put that in a letter that is detailed enough, but also short enough to actually get through the system and get paid effectively. And because all of those were unstructured, historically, we had not had systems that were capable of going into those unstructured documents and extracting accurately the most relevant information for any given case. And that is really where large language models shine, and why there's this kind of step change happening now in terms of our capabilities. And this is exactly what we've built DocIQ to do, is go through that same process of understanding the denial reason, the medical criteria, gathering the appropriate evidence in the record, develop the right arguments and draft the appeal letter. And we'll show you how we do that, in this demo here in a way that is both efficient and accurate, so that we can, again, drive better outcomes. I just want to make a couple of notes before we jump into the demo here, because you'll hear a voiceover of the demo kind of describing it. One of the things you'll see in the demo is how we apply these models to individual medical records to pull out relevant information and then ultimately use that information in the draft appeal letters. We use an approach, and I'll use a technical term here that you don't need to remember, but an approach called RAG, or Retrieval Augmented Generation. And what that means is this system only looks in the four corners of that medical record to extract information. So it's not commingling data, and it's not making up data or making up answers if it can't find it within that medical record. It's exclusively looking for an answer in the medical record, and then if it finds it, pulling it out and citing it. And if it doesn't find it, it will say it doesn't find it and it's not present. So this is really important, obviously, for HIPAA and for other compliance reasons, but almost more importantly for accuracy and for generating the feedback back to our clients about what is missing in those cases. How could you actually improve the documentation upstream to avoid some of these downgrades in the first place? So with that, I think we can jump to the demo. You'll see that it's focused on DRG downgrades, which is what we are focused on initially, but I'll talk more about our roadmap in a little bit. We're expanding to other denial types, but take it away.
Thank you for joining us to learn more about DocIQ. Today, we'll be walking through the Assistant and Appeals modules in DocIQ. First, let's look at the Assistant module. The Assistant is a tool to help you search medical records for information to support appeal writing. There are predefined questions that are a great starting point for users to begin looking through the medical records. The user simply has to click on the question, and the Assistant will take you to the answer. The Assistant works tirelessly to provide the best responses and even provides page numbers for users to follow along in the record. This helps reduce human error since the Assistant shows directly in the document where it gathered the information. Users can also ask their own questions to further their understanding of the medical record. These questions automatically save to DocIQ so that they can always come back to reference in the future. The Assistant is a critical part of helping users find evidence quickly in the medical record to help decrease their time spent on writing appeals and be able to have a more comprehensive understanding of the record. Speaking of appeals, now let's take a look at the Appeals module in DocIQ. Users simply have to click on the Appeals module on the left panel to get there. To begin, users will start with a 4-step workflow so that DocIQ has all the information to write an appeal. Users will select the denial type, type in the disputed code, upload the denial letter, and then double check to make sure all the information is correct before DocIQ does the hard work of writing the appeals letter. During this process, users can actually leave DocIQ and begin working on another account while DocIQ processes the uploaded information. This process approximately takes 3 to 5 minutes to complete, so users won't have to wait around for hours to see the appeal letter. After the Assistant has drafted the appeal, we can now take a look at how the Assistant gathered the information and wrote the appeal letter. First is the denial information. This section details the information the user inputted into the appeals wizard. You can also delete the denial letter if you would like to start over or accidentally uploaded the wrong thing. There's also a short summary of the denial letter that is included as well. The next section is the investigation summary. This section lays out how the Assistant investigated the medical record and summarized the findings for you to review. The diagnostic guidelines show the article used to support drafting the appeal letter and even links to the article for you to view. Below the guidelines are the key points and analysis, where page numbers are also linked for users to validate the information. If you would like to take a step further and check the question and answer pairs the assistant used, we have our Check Our Work section. This section shows the questions the assistant used to understand the record and write the summary. If you haven't caught on yet, we love to cite where the information comes from so users feel confident using our tool. After looking at the investigation summary, let's take a look at the actual appeal letter. Though most users like to use the original appeal draft, if users do ever want to make changes, they can easily do it within DocIQ. Users have access to editing tools and can change the draft within DocIQ. My favorite feature is that users also have access to the original draft. So if you ever accidentally delete the entire draft, they can simply click Original to get a copy again. Once users have made edits, they can click Copy Appeal to paste into the template that they use to send the appeal letter out. As you can see, DocIQ is a very simple to use but powerful interface that allows users to save time on writing appeals, find information and evidence quickly in the documents, and also reduce human errors as the appeals are data-driven. Thank you so much again for joining me on this demo of DocIQ.
So that gives you hopefully a sense for the platform that we built and how we're using it. Let me just kind of emphasize a couple of things and then talk about our journey in terms of investment here. One is that, we're showing software here, but this is the software we build for our users internally. So we are not licensing that software externally, but our goal today is to show you what we're building and how we're using large language models and AI in our business so that you can understand how it's making a difference for us and how that difference then translates to our clients. As Jim mentioned, we really view it as kind of incumbent on us as a partner on the provider side to try to make these investments to counteract some of the investments that are happening on the payer side and enable our provider community to keep up with a lot of those advancements in technology. So that's really why we're doing it. And as we think about Aspirion's kind of core competency around complex claims, complex cases, and having SMEs that are true experts in these areas, we had that unit economics problem of not being able to go kind of down the curve in terms of the size of claim to be able to really address these downgrades. And so investing in this platform lets us now give a new kind of capability to our clients where we can handle DRG downgrades in particular at much lower dollar thresholds. And then as we continue to build this out for other denial types, we're currently working on inpatient to outpatient downgrades and other medical necessity types of denials, broadly. We'll be able to continue to kind of expand the impact that we can create for our clients. And that's why we've done it. And that kind of ties to this chart here, which is, this is illustrative. This is not our, exact numbers, but just to give you a sense for what it would take potentially to build something like what we just showed, just to kind of lay our cards on the table about that kind of build by partner type of strategic decision. So this just simply illustrates over time, what are the key sources of cost in building out an AI function and a platform with that level of sophistication? A lot of it is talent, right? So Jim mentioned, yes, we bought Infinia for the platform, but most importantly, we bought it for the talent of the data scientists, machine learning engineers, full stack engineers. And that talent then works closely with the subject matter expertise that we already have internally. We have a tremendous amount of Aspirion talent already to create these solutions, and is by far the most costly part of it because, as I'm sure everyone can guess, that that type of talent is not cheap because it's in demand kind of across industries. And then as you actually build the platform and then start to expand to other use cases, start to actually put a lot of volume through the platform, you need to support not just building, but maintaining user success, project management, all those good things. You see that cost start to rise, and then start to taper off or stabilize as you kind of get to something that's more in production and is actually generating real value. So, this might not be the exact journey that you might go on, but hopefully that gives you a sense for, the order of magnitude of investment that it might take to build something like what we built. And equally, hopefully you can see why, we strategically were willing to make that investment, because it really has changed the game for us, currently with DRG downgrades and then extending into other denial types over the course of this year and into next. So maybe I'll toss it back to you, Jim.
Yeah, so as we went through this journey, we're still on it. We're early. We're still relatively early, as I would consider, to the total capabilities and the opportunities in front of us. But what we found along this path again is there's real need for real talent and real understanding, and us acquiring that business to accelerate that. They had, again, 5 years working together on similar, not exact problems. But in their journey, even as we looked back on it, one of the challenges they had is they built a really great platform, and it was a great starting point, and they learned a lot along the way. But their collective understanding and the lessons they had learned in attacking or trying to tackle different use case and different problems across different industries of taking unstructured data, structuring it, and producing a generative output. They had learned a lot of things along the way as well, and improved their understanding and hardened their understanding. And they've got lessons learned that they could draw from as we started to share with them the use case we were trying to tackle. One of the things they didn't have, they weren't able to get over their journey as much as we could provide as Aspirion, was access to data and access to these subject matter experts, that it really takes to dig in and combine those components of the talent on the engineering and the data science side, the platform itself, but the data and the use case all coming together. So we had the two components in spades, and then we had a bunch of subject matter experts, and we had a bunch of data, and we knew the process. They in turn had the tech talent, the PhD talent, the data science talent, and the platform. It was bringing those together that really began to unlock the power of what a tool based on a large language model could actually do. And so again, we've got one singular kind of use case in a broad category, I would say, about using clinical evidence to justify the payment on a specific claim. But you can hopefully see that there are other ways you could apply the same type of technology to take unstructured data, structure it, and produce an output. And again, as Spencer said, we're not doing it because we're trying to license the software. We get that question a lot. Can we license it? Can we have it? Can we do it? No, we're not in that world today by any means. We are truly trying to help automate a manual process that exists today to take cost out of that system to allow us to get a more efficient outcome. And as Spencer said, I mean, I'll give you a very specific example. Historically, when using our attorneys to generate these appeal letters, we said we will not take claims below $10,000. And again, that was just a unit economics issue where we said, look, to apply this super expensive resource, in your world, a nurse or a clinician, coder of any kind, to spend time to dissect, we can go up to a 3,500 page medical record in less than 5 minutes. I mean, you could give a human 2 weeks, they could do it. But that amount of time and input and resource consumption to then generate an appeal letter to chase a DRG downgrade for, a $2,000 delta makes zero sense. It doesn't make sense for us either. And so we saw that as a huge problem and saying, we've got a human scale problem. We've got a cost to collect an input problem. Can we use technology to remove the barrier there, produce this same type of outcome, which is an appeal letter at the end of the day for us, that is as high a quality as the ones that the humans have done historically, which we proved yes, and then address with a lower cost of input these higher volume, lower dollar claim opportunities? And the answer has been so far yes. So again, it's getting very specific about your use case, the tools you have, the data available you have, the talent you have, the platform, a number of questions as you start to think about where can this be applied? How can we go about setting off on a journey, build, buy, partner? What does that look like? Do we have the capital to go do it? It's expensive, as we illustrated. Do you have the capacity? Do you have the time within your current day-to-day organization to take something like this on? Do you have the capability? Do you have that? Like, we had to go buy the talent, in effect, and then ultimately, as Spencer said, you've got to maintain this over time. So do you have the commitment to continue to maintain this type of automation? They're all super important questions. But at the end of the day, as we look at the market, what's happening, the payers' investment in this technology, on the flip side, we're getting outgunned and outmanned. And so do we really have a choice but to start to explore technologies like this to kind of, as Spencer said, try to balance that equation? We think we have to. And so with that, we'd love to entertain any questions you guys might have about what we shared.
Yeah, so at this point, I would just, if you have any questions, please either enter them into the chat or the Q&A box. I have a few that I can get us started with. The first question, pretty easy, but the question was, what EMRs does DocIQ interface with? Specifically, the question even related to Epic.
Yeah, let's start with that one. So we don't build interfaces straight into anything. So this is an internal tool for us that allows us to do our job faster. And so whether we're doing that using DocIQ or we're still doing it with the manual process, today we have a workflow platform that was in there, but you would have noticed it's called Compass. Compass is our standard workflow and account distribution tool. So for any service line we have, that could be out-of-state Medicaid, that could be workers' comp, that could be MBA, we take a standard data extract as a flat file on a secure FTP transfer out of Epic. We've actually built our own standard Epic extract, and it's in Open Epic today. It's got an ID on its own, and you can download it and save as, and basically populate it with the logic. And that gives us all the data elements we need to basically dump out the patient accounting system and feed it into Compass. And it creates it's an account placement file. It's the claim and the remit. It's the notes, and it's charges, payments, and adjustment transaction level data. So to give it a high level, it feeds into Compass. That allows us to distribute those accounts to the various resources necessary to work it. Workers' comp group, out-of-state Medicaid group, a denials group. Within denials, is it a technical or a clinical denial? Is it of the clinical denials? Is it a really complex clinical denial that requires clinical validation? It allows us to do all that, forget automation. Then if it requires an appeal letter as assigned, that's the work output that is necessary. A human can do it, or it can feed as an interface into DocIQ from Compass, our Compass platform, into our DocIQ platform, and it will do what you just saw. It will ingest the medical record, it will break it down, it will index it, and ultimately write the appeal letter. To get the copy of the medical records when that occurs, we actually today use just the release of information function. So we download a raw PDF and attach it to that Compass account, and it then shares that information with DocIQ to generate that appeal letter and return it back to us. We then, on the Compass side, format that letter as you saw, copy and paste into the right template, and then determine where it needs to be delivered. So if it's United, it goes into the Optum portal. If it's Aetna, it could be freaking print and mail, or a fax, or whatever means of delivery of that actual outcome is. We do that all out of Compass. So what you saw today was just within the get record, now write appeal. You saw it, how it can automate writing an appeal, but then I still got to deliver that appeal back to the right address. So all that to be said is we work today with Epic, Cerner, Meditech, CPSI. We got clients across the board that cover all of those, but there is no necessarily direct interface. There's not a direct interface necessary to power this out of Epic.
Okay, thank you. One question that came in the chat is, do you have a certain set of clinical care guidelines that you use when you're writing your appeals?
Spencer.
Yeah, I can take this one. So we use a few different ones, and we also have flexibility to add more. So for DRG downgrades, our kind of default set is the AHIMA ACTIS coding guidelines. But we also, in some cases, will use payer-specific guidelines. For example, we know UHC has their own sepsis guidelines and those types of things. So we have flexibility in the back end in terms of what we use there. And then as we expand to broader medical necessity arguments, we've licensed Milliman care guidelines, which is what we use today with our people. At the end of the day, the technology works kind of regardless of the guideline, I guess is what I would say. So yes, we are specific about which ones we use because we know which ones are more successful than others. But the advantage of the large language models is they don't really care that much. We don't have to remodel or make a huge investment if we want to switch out which guidelines we're using on the back end.
All right, thank you. One other question that we got was, does the system incorporate content from the record into the appeal letter, or is it attachments? And
Yep.
maybe you got this one before, but I just want to make sure we got that answered.
Yeah, so hopefully that came through in the demo itself, but in case it wasn't clear, the tool looks at it, automatically reads the guidelines and the denial letter, and then it reads the medical record to look for evidence to compare against those guidelines, and then pulls out that evidence automatically with the citation back to the record. So in the denial letter itself, it will have pulled specific facts out that will say, here are the guidelines for sepsis 3, and here's how we've determined that we meet those guidelines based on the evidence in the medical record. We will still attach the relevant parts of the medical record as we submit that so that the payer can see it as well. But it's all kind of fully pulled into the arguments in the appeal letter.
There is a question around the cost.
Yeah, so
what's available for providers.
Maybe I'll take a pass, and then Jim, if you want to elaborate. So I'm not sure if exactly you're asking about the cost of investment or the cost in terms of our services. We operate on a contingency basis, so that we're happy to talk more about that individually about what that means, and depends on the service line and the age of the accounts and all those things. The cost of the investment in this platform is what we tried to illustrate on that slide, the second to last slide there. I would say on the order of magnitude of, call it tens to dozens of millions of dollars over time. So it's not cheap, but it's also, not crazy in terms of us being able to afford to do it. But it's definitely a deliberate investment that is not just, a few $100,000 here or there.
Yeah, and if it was cost to, what do we charge for this service? As Spencer said, it's a contingency rate, regardless if we're using a human or we're using the machine. It varies by age of account, dollar balance, and type of denial, etc. So I'm happy to have that discussion with anybody, but we just charge a contingency rate just as we would for a normal outsourced service. We only get paid when our providers get paid. So until the cash is posted in your patient accounting system, there is no credit attributed to us. And we follow it through kind of to the end. Even if we wrote the, appeal letter automatically and it gets rejected, we'll follow up on it again, kind of that whole thing. So what we were showing here was merely, I think about, we have a manual factory floor, kind of that one slide. We have a manual factory floor where humans, do all the components down the conveyor belt. And then we built in turn an automated version of that same process that allows us to flow that information through there and get the same kind of appeal as an outcome on the other end. but then we still got to deliver it. We still got to follow up on it. We still got to make sure the, you know, provider gets paid appropriately. There's work to be done manually still after that fact, but what I hope this showed was that it speeds it up, it makes it more comprehensive, and it allows us to do more in terms of volume with less, you know, dollar threshold limits that we've had in the past.
Okay, well, with that, I think that we will end today's webinar. Just as a reminder for anyone who joined late, we will send out the recording, the link to the recording and the presentation within a few days of completion of today's webinar. And then also, this session was available for continuing education credits, and we will send out one HFMA will send out those certificates as well. If you have any questions, feel free to please reach out, and I would either be happy to get those to Aspirion or and forward those questions. So thank you for attending today's webinar, everyone. I would like to thank our presenters, Spencer and Jim, and everyone stay warm and have a great day.
Thanks, Jenna.
Thanks,
We
everyone.
appreciate the time.
Bye,
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.